Welcome to this explainer. Today we are doing something absolutely wild. We're going to decode ancient magic, but not as some vague mystical philosophy. We're looking at it as hard, computationally provable mathematics. We are actually mapping the esoteric claims of the classic 1908 text, the Kybalion, directly onto a mechanized mathematical theorem ledger. So let's just start with a really provocative thought. What if the esoteric secrets of the universe, the kind whispered by mystics for centuries, are actually just a completely formal codebase waiting to be executed? What if it's all just a complex system architecture that we literally haven't had the language to describe until right now? Now, the Kybalion actually promises its readers a literal magic key to those who truly understand its 7 principles. But today, we aren't going to look at this key as just a metaphor. No way. We're going to look at the exact computational mechanism of how that key turns the luck, relying on formal proofs from the Gnosis theorem ledger. Essentially, we're taking philosophical concepts and testing them using strict computer logic. All right, let's take a quick look at our system manual index. We'll be covering 1. Decoding the ledger. 2. The 7 structural principles. 3. The 3 system layers. 4. Critical system errors. And finally, 5. The operating costs. Let's get right into it. Okay, Section 1. Decoding the ledger, subtitled Constraint Power Duality. Lean. So we are treating the Kybalion as what's called a gnosis theorem ledger. We're proving that its mystical concepts are in fact strict mathematical rules. In this framework, the text isn't just pretty poetry, right? It's a constraint document. Every single spiritual law it outlines is formalized into a computational surface. This proves out the structural invariance of the universe, the totally unchangeable laws of reality, without a single error, or what mathematicians like to call a zero-sorry proof. Moving right along to Section 2, the 7 structural principles, or translating the software. Let's dive into the very first principle, mentalism, which says the universe is mental. In our formal ledger, this translates directly to substrate neutrality. Just like a software program can run on a Mac or a PC, the universe's state space is fundamentally pure information. Matter, energy, power, all of that is entirely subordinate to this informational surface. They're basically just the hardware running the code. We literally live and move within the state space of an infinite mind. Next up is correspondence, famously phrased as above, so below. Mathematically, this is known as braided infinity. This means the exact same mathematical signature appears at every single scale of the system. Imagine a self-similar tower of planes going up without any limit. The master key works on every door simply because every wall is mathematically built in the exact same shape. It's brilliant. Then we have the principle of vibration, which maps to a concept called alpha resurrection. And the math here reveals a totally mind-bending paradox. What the ancients called high vibration or spirit is actually the system's ground state of 0. It moves so incredibly fast, it appears perfectly still. On the flip side, low vibration or dense matter moves so slowly it also seems at rest. The entire manifold is in constant transition to the master clock's fundamental tick. Now, when we look at polarity, it maps to what the ledger calls the syzygy. And this is huge because it mathematically proves that truth and failure aren't these completely different things. They actually exist on the exact same spectrum or topological axis. Truth is simply a high-density 0 state, while failure is just low-density noise. They are fundamentally identical in their nature. Okay, so what about rhythm? Well, rhythm translates to the fork, race, and fold sequence. Everything swings like a pendulum, flowing out into departure, racing to the edge, and folding back into integration. But here's the catch. The true practitioner learns to identify the invariant ground that remains perfectly still while the rest of the system just oscillates around them. Then we hit cause and effect. In our system, this acts as a highly specific naming protocol. What we usually just shrug off as chance or luck is mathematically proven to be mere amnesia. It's a fog hiding the exact causal index. Mastering this actually means lifting that fog, finding the exact bug in the code, and restoring the protocol so you aren't just a victim of unseen variables. And finally, for the principles, we have gender, which is formalized as the generative syzygy. This basically dictates that absolutely no creation is mathematically possible without the union of 2 distinct forces. The masculine principle provides the invariant plan, the codebase, while the feminine principle provides the matrix, the actual field of manifestation. Together, their intersection generates all of reality. All right, section 3, the 3 system layers, or the network architecture. So with the software completely defined, the Kybalion is incredibly strict about separating the architecture into 3 distinct layers. You, the student, are the agent, or the user. Those 7 principles we just covered, they are the operator, essentially your operating system. And finally, the all, the fundamental ground of reality, well, that's the hardware. The key opens the door to the hardware for sure, but none of these 3 layers ever collapse into each other. Which brings us to section 4, critical system errors, also known as the 2 sins. Look, just like any complex network, if you fundamentally misunderstand your permission levels here, you are going to trigger some fatal bugs. The first is animal magnetism. This is the ultimate user error of mistaking yourself for the hardware. It's literally mistaking a drop for the entire ocean. Then we have operator idolatry, which is worshiping the operating system as if it were the hardware. That's like worshiping your keyboard instead of writing the code. So the formal corrective here is absolutely vital. You have to remember that the 7 principles are just tools. Mathematical proof dictates that no matter how perfectly you learn to use the operating system, you are still just a user. System mastery never, ever promotes you to become the hardware itself. Finally, let's jump into section 5, the operating costs and the mathematics of infinity. Remember we mentioned vibration earlier? Well, physically, this operates through a mathematical processing step called the Klineman lift. You start at a completely free vacuum state with a score of 0. But every time the system perturbs or creates something, it adds a step. It grows the score until it hits heavy saturation, which is what we physically experience as dense matter. And this brings us to what is essentially the universe's ultimate economy, the no-cloning tax. Now, unlike copying a digital file on your laptop, in this architecture, you cannot duplicate a state for free. If you try to copy a positive score carrier, the system strictly generates entropy. Spreading energy costs a literal mathematical fee. Take a look at this exact cost formula. Basically, broadcasting a state to multiple recipients taxes you in entropy exactly proportional to your current score. And this reveals the ultimate mathematical loophole. A true master is required to operate from a score of 0. Because 0 multiplied by anything is 0, they can fan out their influence infinitely without paying that heavy entropy tax that drains the rest of us. This mathematical boundary brings us to our ultimate conclusion about the underlying hardware that makes all of this even possible. Even knowing the absolute deepest math of the operating system, knowing that the universe is mental and substrate neutral, that is still just a principle of manifestation. The actual ground of reality, the all, remains structurally and mathematically unknowable. It sits completely immune, far above the mechanism. So it leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. We've literally mapped ancient magic into strict, computationally provable code. We know the user, we know the OS, and we know the hardware. But as you navigate your own life, are you correctly positioned as the agent? Are you skillfully operating the system, or is the system just effortlessly operating you?